I'd like to first introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Becky Benvenuti and I am your town clerk tax collector. And with two major elections fast approaching this fall, I'd like to speak to you today in the hopes that I may be able to answer some of the questions that we've been receiving about the primary process and about the new voter ID law that recently passed. So next Tuesday, September 11th, is the state primary election. And that's when the Republican and the Democratic parties will be choosing their candidates who will appear on the November election ballot for the offices of governor, representatives in Congress, executive counselor, state senator and state representative, county sheriff, attorney, treasurer, register of deeds, commissioner, and delegate to the state Republican convention. The primary election will be held from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The polling place is the town hall in the downstairs auditorium. And although voter registration ended yesterday for the primary election, please be reminded that New Hampshire is a same-day registration state, which means that you may register directly at the polling place on the day of the election. And as you've all heard and seen in the papers, hopefully, New Hampshire does now have a new voter photo ID law. And the question of the day is, what does this new law mean to you, the voter? The law is rather complex, and it has three major phases. The first and second phases are being carried out during this election year, with the primary election next Tuesday and then the November general election on November 6th. The part of the law which is more stringent does not begin until next September 2013. So for the purposes of today's discussion, I would like to review the processes that we're going to be going through during this election year. First, we'd like to talk about next week's primary election. When you arrive at the polling place at the town hall and check in with the ballot clerks on election day, in addition to stating your name and verifying your address, you will be asked to provide a valid form of photo ID. So what forms of photo ID are considered valid and will be accepted? The list of acceptable photo IDs for this election year is much longer than the list of valid photo IDs, which will be accepted beginning September of 2013. Currently, if you have a driver's license issued by any state, even if it is expired, an ID card issued by the New Hampshire Division of Motor Vehicles, which is also considered a non-driver's ID, a U.S. Armed Services ID card, a U.S. passport, again, even if that is expired, a photo ID issued by the federal, state, county, or municipal government, a student photo ID, or any other photo ID that's deemed legitimate by certain of your local election officials. All of those will be accepted as valid photo IDs beginning in September. So what happens if you don't have an approved photo ID? The consequences for not presenting a photo ID has three separate phases under this new law. The first phase begins with next week's primary, and it's rather simple. And the second phase is initiated for the November general election. The third phase, as I said earlier, will begin next September of 2013. The most important thing, though, which I really want to emphasize, is there's been some talk and misunderstanding. All stages, starting with next Tuesday right through 2013, means that no one will be denied the right to vote, regardless of photo ID or not. There are ways, there are just certain steps that both the voter and the election officials will have to go through in order to make that happen. So let's talk about the first stage for next Tuesday's primary. If you do not possess a photo ID, you will be provided with an explanatory document about the new law, and then you will be informed of the need for you to bring a photo ID beginning with the November general election. And finally, you will be provided with your party's ballot, either Democratic or Republican, and permitted to vote. To comply with the new law, the ballot clerks are required to keep track of all the voters who do not present a photo ID. And then we are required to report the number of voters not presenting photo IDs to the state on election night. As election officials here in Newmarket, we've set some major goals for ourselves. to comply with all of these election laws and provide you, the resident, with the best voting experience possible is our #1 goal. And we're making every effort to educate our residents to the very best of our ability so that Newmarket is able to report the lowest possible number of voters who do not present valid photo IDs on Election Day. Before we move on to talk about the second phase of the photo ID law, which begins with the November election, I'd also like to take a moment and talk about the voting process, which comes with a primary election. And that does cause some confusion and sometimes some frustration on the part of the voters due to the way that the state law is formed. You are required when you come to a primary election to take the ballot of the party that you are registered with, and that's either the Republican ballot or the Democratic ballot. Under New Hampshire law, the last day that voters were allowed to change their party affiliation for this year was June 5th, 2012. That's the day before the filing period begins for the state primary election. If you have not declared a party and you're listed on the voter checklist as an undeclared voter, when you arrive at the polls and check in on Election Day, you will also be asked to declare which party's ballot you wish to vote, either Democrat or Republican. By declaring a party, you are actually affiliating yourself with that party. And if you leave the polling place without taking any further action, you will remain affiliated with that party and be shown on the voter checklist thereafter as being affiliated with either the Democrat or the Republican Party. However, if you do wish to return to undeclared status, you may do so very simply. Before you leave the polling place, after casting your ballot, simply proceed to the supervisors of the checklist table, sign your name on their list of undeclared voters, and you will be returned to undeclared status. So the November 6th election. First off, that election will be held at the Newmarket Junior Senior High School. And again, the polling hours are from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. We are expecting the largest turnout, the largest voter turnout in history for this election. And we're already brainstorming and making plans to ensure that our residents' voting experience for this major election is efficient and as positive a voting experience as possible. However, you, as voters, can also help us with this effort by registering to vote early. This will help to ensure that we do not have long voter registration lines on Election Day. Absentee ballots will also be available in mid to late October. But in New Hampshire, absentee ballots are only available to people who are unable to vote in person on Election Day due to being out of town, for religious reasons, or if you have a disability that prevents you from accessing the polling place. It's very important to note that absentee ballots must be requested in writing by the voter himself. No ballots can be received or given to anyone other than the specific voter requesting the ballot. This also causes some confusion and frustration at times because the town clerk cannot accept an absentee ballot from anyone other than the voter themselves. And even though it's completed and it's in a sealed envelope, a person's spouse or daughter or what have you is not allowed to bring that ballot back to the clerk's office. So to ensure that your vote counts, it's important to follow these instructions. All right, back to photo ID. What forms of valid photo ID will be accepted at the general election? The list of acceptable photo ID for this election year, like I said before, is the same for both the primary and the general election. It is that long, extensive list. What's different is the consequences that a voter is going to have to go through if they don't have the valid form of photo ID. Now, if there are people out there that don't have any type of photo ID, don't drive, or any of those things, the state has in the law, if you would like to come to the town clerk's office, we do have vouchers available. They're a $10 voucher. There's no cost to you, and you can get that voucher completed at our office and then take that voucher to your local DMV. Beginning, they've told us October 1st, they should have the ability to start doing this. And what they'll do is create for you a special voter ID. When you arrive at the November 6th election at the high school, and you do not have a photo ID, you will be required to execute what's called a challenged voter affidavit form, which you must fill out in its entirety, sign it, and have it witnessed by one of a list of specific election officials who will be at the election. Once executed, you must then present your form to the ballot clerks before they will be able to check you in and provide you with a ballot. Again, to comply with the new photo ID law, the election officials are required to keep track of each voter who does not present a photo ID, report the number of voters who do not present a photo ID, and then, for this election, report the actual voters who submitted a challenged voter affidavit. The Secretary of State must then send each voter a letter requesting confirmation that they did in fact vote in that election. And the voter has 30 days in which to respond. If the Secretary of State does not receive a response, or if the voter responds negatively, the Attorney General is then required to conduct an investigation to determine whether fraudulent voting did in fact occur. If for any of you who would like more information about all of this, it's all available on the Secretary of State's website, and that's www.sos.nh.gov. In summary, our message to all of you is this: please get out and vote. Get out and vote on Tuesday, September 11th, and again on Tuesday, November 6th. If you're not already a registered voter here in Newmarket, register to vote as soon as possible in advance of the general election to avoid the long lines and help us expedite our Newmarket election process. You must register to vote in person. We've had many residents report to us this year receiving mailings from national political organizations, some of the mailings which have even looked as though they were mailed by myself as town clerk. And these mailings have included a mail-in form or instructions to how to electronically register to vote. This was an error. In New Hampshire law does require that you register to vote in person, and you may do this at the town clerk's office during business hours or at a special meeting of the supervisors of the checklist. The New Hampshire Attorney General and the Secretary of State has contacted these organizations, and those organizations have since retracted this information and made corrections on their website. If any of you do receive any of that type of things, we would be very interested in knowing about it, so we'd ask you to please make us aware. And finally, please bring your photo ID when you come to vote so that we can report low numbers in Newmarket. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or anyone else in my office, in the town clerk's office. The number is 659-3073, extension 4070, or please just stop by during regular business hours. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to listen to this, and we look forward to seeing you out to vote next Tuesday for the primary election at the Newmarket Town Hall, and on Tuesday, November 6th for the November general election, which will be held at the high school.